All right, welcome back everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying the show. Before I get launched into the introduction of our first panel of the day, I would like to just make sure everyone realizes that a virtual exhibit hall is open now. Please do, in between speakers and sessions, swing by, visit our sponsors and exhibitors. They make everything we do here for STEM education possible. So please do swing by and show them your support while we're in between sessions today and in Tech Talk. So with that, let me launch into introducing our first panel of the show. That is going to be moderated today by Major General Retired George France, Defense Cybersecurity Lead for Accenture. I'll let you click through to the impressive details of his bio for those of you that are online, but I do just want to highlight a couple of things that the General is the former Deputy of Operations for U.S. Cyber Command and was the Commanding General of the Army Signal and Intelligence Command. So very relevant for our conversations here today, and looking forward to hearing what he and his panel have to share with us, and then your interaction with him and his questions. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to General France.
Hey, so hello everyone. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the country or where in the world you're piping in from. So first, on behalf of the Accenture team here, we're really excited to present today. Never great to follow General Wegeman, but I guess there was enough time between his presentation and now where the excitement has curated a little bit. And we are thrilled to be here to be able to discuss, a perspective on convergence, digital transformation, and multi-domain ops as it relates to space and cyberspace operations. So looking forward to this. Marty, go ahead and go to the presenter slide, please. So just a quick introduction of the team. Again, I won't do my bio again. Again, George France here. Our team is comprised of really two folks who I would describe as more operator commander folks. That's Sean Burnham and myself. And then we have two heavy, very talented technologists. So first I'll introduce Arnie Baltus. Arnie is our lead for client strategy, innovation development, senior enterprise architect, and an expert on governance frameworks and methodologies. Arnie is leading a major DoD project now on digital transformation for precision fires and multi-domain ops, and he'll talk a little bit about that. Our next presenter will be John Burnham. Again, former Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Defense Threat Reduction and Arms Control, but probably more impressive on his bio, over 23 years as a naval special warfare operator, commander, super deep experience there, and a premier operator in all domains. And he currently is our senior strategy and mission command lead at Accenture. And then finally, our cleanup hitter, Marty Hebler, is one of our true engineers. She's a managing director at Accenture. Marty is our Armed Forces Sector Technical Account Lead. So she supports Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, frankly, all of the federal government with her technical expertise, systems engineering, system architecture, innovation, and program management. So a heavy hitter. So I think what we're going to give you today is a good perspective, a mix of operators, users of technology, and then folks who actually are those who deliver the technology in support of operations, which I know is the big theme here. And General Wegeman talked quite a bit about that during his presentation. So if we go ahead, Marty, go ahead and go to the first slide for me, please. The topic and the thing that I have experienced throughout my 30 plus years in the military, and then my almost 4 years after having transitioned to Accenture, is the need for really a holistic look at transformation, which is still probably not as pervasive as we would like it to be. And in this converged battle space that we're focused on here for this event, first and foremost, people are the drivers of innovation. And so people are at the center. And I'm going to talk a lot about that in different places, as are the other folks on the team. But in this day and age, digital underpins everything. And the enterprise architecture is your center of gravity. So those people, those operators, commanders who are working on this platform, they are underpinned by technology, and it has to be usable technology. When I joined Accenture, one of our industry graybeards, this was a 40-year, in his industry, just a super graybeard expert, knowledgeable. It's the Yoda of digital transformation. He took me under his wing when I first joined as a novice business person, and said something that was really compelling. He said, look, I am never comfortable in my role as this, senior leader at Accenture. I can never think that I know even a portion of what I need to know, because technology is going to transform, and our business is going to change 40% plus every year. That is just the speed that technology is going to impact what we do. And if I ever think that I'm comfortable, I get comfortable think that I think I know what we're doing, then we're behind and our business is going to die. And so that is absolutely the case when you think about cyberspace operations and space operations and this notion of convergence. we're never going to get there because 40% of the technologies and the things that people think of to do with that technology, it's going to change every year. And at that 40% change rate per year, are we in DoD able to keep up? And the answer now, we know the answer is no. We know we're working to do that. Forums like this are helping us inform ourselves to get there. But ultimately, what it will really take for us to even get close and to be competitive with our nation state counterparts, adversaries and rivals, is a holistic approach to technology. And again, it goes well beyond the technical. General Wegeman mentioned this morning, but if the intended applications and tools are not user friendly, if the operators can't operate them expertly with minimal training, then you're really not getting to the core of the mission. And so the slide, as you can see, again, 5 basic areas. The first one, we say it a lot. I've said it as a commander, I've said it as a staff officer, and now I'm saying it as somebody on the business side. Mission needs to drive IT. IT cannot drive your mission. And this means the warfighter has got to be at the center of everything we do. And when we say warfighter, that is, the individual operator at the pointy edge, applying technology all the way up to the Joint Task Force commander, who's got to make decisions using that technology to drive his mission. And so again, transformation initiatives have to start and end with the individual soldier, sailor, airman, marine, civilian operator. And those capabilities have to provide at every level, measurable, they have to be measurable in terms of providing outcomes for the mission. What is that application being used for, and what does it contribute to the effects on the battle space or in command and control that are needed to get done? Again, the centerpiece or the core of transformation, we know it's critically important. It can either get understated or overstated. Is the notion of data as being central to convergence. And John Burnham's going to talk quite a bit about data and the work that he's doing in support of DoD. But what it really means is data at the speed of mission means ruthless enforcement and employment of interoperability standards and architecture tailored to be able to move that data, put it and make it accessible where it needs to be. It's got to have an efficient, securely designed architecture. The only way that you can really maximize the available capabilities that are going to come with cloud and cloud computing and artificial intelligence and machine learning, advanced analytics, all of those things, they are driven and fueled by data. And if the data isn't curated, managed, and available to drive those applications and capabilities, you will never get there. The third piece, and again, Arnie is going to talk quite a bit about this notion of an interoperable, agile enterprise architecture. We really think the center of gravity for a lot of these things, particularly the joint mission command systems, joint all-domain operations, joint cyber C2, is a configurable open architecture, enterprise architecture geared to mission, extensible, where you can bring new technologies in and out. They can emerge, be secured, be applied, and changed out at the speed of change. And the only way that you can get there and do that at the scale that we in the DoD, DoD has to do that, is with a mature, really deep enterprise architecture strategy built around this holistic strategy for transformation. Again, going to both my intel and my cyber background, we cannot build enough, we cannot do enough to secure every bit of the mission space, application, data, network. Security has got to be at the beginning of the discussion and then woven throughout everything we do with every one of our capabilities. I mean, SolarWinds is the tip of the iceberg. And we know that the nation state adversaries we're facing, Russia, China, others, they know that is our most vulnerable point on the battlefield is our cyber enterprise. They also, lowest barrier to entry, and we know that they are continuously conducting reconnaissance and posturing. So we have just got to think about cybersecurity. Security cannot be an add-on, can't be a bolt-on. It's got to be built in at the beginning of the discussion, and it's got to be continuously updated and improved, like improving the foxhole. You've got to improve security as you go along. You can never be complacent, and you can never think that you have solved that problem. And finally, back to people first, a critical element of people first, and Wedge talked about that a little bit this morning, General Wegeman, was this notion of cultural change. It is, user-centered design, I at the center, the user at the center, is critical to developing the right kinds of capabilities. It's this notion that he talked about as well, collaboration and trust as you're building capabilities. It's a change in culture, the way that you approach it. And really, holistic digital transformation is the underpinning of everything that we need to do in the space domain and cyber domain across the joint all-domain fight It's got to be holistic, it's got to be inclusive, and it has to be that human center at the beginning, to drive it in a way that makes it applicable to warfighters at every echelon. Marty, let's go ahead and go. And I'm going to hit a quick example before I turn over to the rest of the team to talk through. So digital mission command transformation, I'm going to narrow down a little bit just to focus in on a topic that we've had a lot of conversations around with many of the key leaders across DoD and across the IC and other. Just a quick example, convergence. So right now, there are multiple views on what convergence means from a mission command, from a JADC2 perspective. The Army would say, and again, as a former Army officer, I can say we actually write doctrine, read it, and tend to apply it sometimes, is for the Army, convergence achieves rapid and continuous integration of all domains across time, space, and capabilities to overmatch the enemy. Underpinning these tenets are mission command and discipline initiative at all warfighting echelons. That's how the Army would doctrinally describe convergence. The Air Force, or at least we know General Wegeman would describe convergence as the merging of distinct technologies and industries or devices into a unified whole to meet the objectives. A slightly different view of the same problem. And so what I would say is I'm gonna start with an even older quote to bring us kind of back to where we are, which is, you've all probably heard, many of you are former military, you've studied, military history a little bit. Armar Bradley's quote was, "Amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics." And I think in this age of digital warfighting and digital transformation, commander professionals study enterprise operations and architectures. In fact, I just was listening in on a recent panel that General Steve Fogarty participated in from Army Cyber. And he made the comment at a recent event that a critical element of the information advantage is decision dominance on his business systems. Think about that. Our mission of driving and running the network as a critical weapon systems mean I need to be able to see both my operational information and data, my business system data, which is what drives my enterprise and keeps it viable. And I've got to be able to see those with equal fidelity and with the equal ability to drive decisions off this notion of dominance, information dominance in decision-making. And so with this, the chart here shows you, again, a very simple, there's thousands and thousands of diagrams out there around mission command and JADC2 and wiring diagrams and architecture things. But this is intended to be a fairly simple construct with a lot of complexity underneath it that basically shows you, merged mission command requires an effective blending of operational command and capabilities, warfighting tools and systems, with your administrative control, your ADCOM, those administrative tasks that actually drive your enterprise and allow you to sustain it and operate it. And those have to be blended through using those elements at the center of the chart there. Again, cloud data and analytics, built around a secure boundary is what allows you to really get to the notion of what joint all domain command and control in any of the domains means. And you have to have that blended capability in order for commanders to see themselves, or operators to be able to contribute to that enterprise and to be able to operate it effectively. And lastly, really, and I'll come back to this again, the most important element of all of this process is the notion of cultural and organizational change. I mean, I spent most of my career after Desert Storm was the last kind of heavy operation that I was in with heavy maneuver force. Most of us have spent, up until this point, our careers fighting counterinsurgency and building tools, techniques, capabilities to do that. We've really got, this is a generational cultural change to get us into digital warfighting. This notion of partnering well with academics and industry and others to build and pull together the key ingredients for convergence. Operators and staffs and industry partners and academia and others who understand this notion of enterprise architectures, cloud, big data management, artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, cybersecurity, pulling those things together, to get you where you need to get. And it's a journey. Again, this is an organizational, cultural change and a journey to get you those key activities along the way. We've got to transform at the core. Again, the centerpiece of this chart is we've got to get a holistic view of all elements of digital mission command and operations transformation, cloud data, analytics, all of those things that are at the center, and look at them holistically with the mission outcomes at the beginning. And then we've got to grow that core in a way that makes sense. We've got to re-architect and make sure that a solid enterprise architecture based on the outcomes of the mission, JADC2, long-range precision fires, joint cyber warfighting architectures, that the mission outcomes of that platform drive backwards, and that is what drives the IT, not the other way around. We've got to innovate with new capabilities. Again, building this new workforce, and it was great, General Wegeman's, perspective on showing individuals that are those drivers of innovation. They're out there, and as he said, let the stallions loose. We've got to build that culture into everything we do at every echelon. Build on the workforce. Finally, we've got to manage wise pivots. And what I mean by that is we in the DoD, I have experience over 30 years, as do many folks on here. How many thousands of pilots and experiments have we done that ultimately did not result in any outcomes that drove progress or were not integratable into a future enterprise architecture that took advantage of some great pilots? We've got to really manage our enterprise architecture and our transformation process. So when we are experimenting and we are piloting, we have a vision for where they will go. We have a sense of what the outcome of that pilot is and how it contributes to a grander vision of a whole, and that we're managing those resources very carefully so we're not stifling innovation. We're just targeting our innovation and resourcing in ways that actually, provide an outcome. And I'm going to pass over next to Arnie to kind of walk you through an example of, an innovation process that is focused on a mission set that's critical to all the services, and we think will provide some pretty decent lessons in how to look at convergence through a slightly different lens. So Arnie, I'll pass over to you for the next piece.
Thanks, George. This is an OV1 that we're developing for, or have developed at this point, for one of our DoD partners who, as George said, we're helping with their digital transformation, their data strategy, and cloud modernization efforts. So early versions of this diagram, when we started putting it together, really resonated with senior leadership on our partner side, and really opened the doors and enabled our team to get in and talk to the different stakeholders that are represented here. And what's quite interesting is that we struck a nerve and we kept pulling on a thread that really we got a lot of folks that, up until now are, more or less living in their own little silos. And we're starting to be able to use this diagram and a lot of the things that have come out of this to help facilitate those necessary transformative discussions that are, helping our client down the road. So where we started was trying to model just a real simple use case where we're trying to figure out how we integrate and operationalize some technologies that are in the development pipeline, and to get a little more specific, sensor to shooter. So what we're trying to do is take that viewpoint and decompose it into how do we actually get at what tends to be these large and nebulous problems that we'd like to talk about. How do we actually, for like data and cloud modernization, right? With organizations so big and so many different systems going on and so many different, groups of people that really need this unifying vision, right? How do we actually start to engage these folks and make this task, understandable and manageable, right? And then provide them a good, pragmatic, objectively oriented approach to execute and get after what they need to do to execute this transformation. So that use case really kind of snowballed into developing a whole set of different models and viewpoints, but really kind of telling the story, not just from that perspective of our initial use case, sensor to shooter. How do we actually prosecute a target based on what information, but really starting to ask about things that make this whole that is the guiding principles of this whole ecosystem, right? How did the sensor get deployed in the first place? What's the whole decision process and all the different supporting activities and the data required to determine what particular shooter is the right one for the task? Looking at kinetic and non-kinetic options and the different integrations that those capabilities might have. And then all of that, performed in concert with other capabilities like sustainment and maneuver and things like that. And then to make our life really hard, we also said, okay, how about looking at this from a perspective and from the joint and partner coalition collaboration? And then icing on the cake is, okay, where are our opportunities for introducing AI, robotics, automation, machine learning to help augment the decision maker's process and really relieve the stress and cognitive overload of those warfighters throughout the echelon, right? Core and all the way down to the guy that's pulling the lanyard. And so we came up with this model, and this is why I think one of the big reasons why our partner has engaged Accenture, really kind of tapping into our vast commercial experience of how do we actually apply current modern tech to this problem, and really opening the aperture and envisioning the what is possible. Basically, how do we transform our capabilities that foundationally are the same, have been the same forever, to take and embrace and be enabled by current technologies, and how does data fuel this whole venture. And as we were developing our portfolio of models and whatnot, we got into this conceptualization technique of basically developing a product model, which is how do you envision not just our partner, our DoD partner, but their joint and coalition partners' capabilities, right, as a collection of products and services, right? To start creating a catalog of what each of these armed services actually can provide to themselves, as well as to each other, and developing actual product models that you can envision as being reconfigurable and quickly reassembled as the situation requires, as the mission dictates. We can quickly envision what needs to be done, what's the right calibration of talent and resources to apply to it, what services do we assemble to make that happen. And then if you can think about even further, let's put APIs on those capabilities, right? So if you can envision being able to define an API that accesses that capability, commands that capability, and then monitors that capability for the service, basically as that service, is delivering that product or service, you can really get after, making sense of those lofty and nebulous cloud modernization initiatives, really providing context to what all that means. And then also too, going back to that coverage of the JADC2 community's objectives, if you can just imagine how much easier their lives might be if everybody, talking about all the U.S. Armed Services, and even two federal agencies that might be working, and local agencies, if they can envision themselves and each other in that fashion, right? So it's basically a marketplace of capabilities that we can digitally access, right? And if we can control the flow of data and monitor the flow of data, you've got that real-time access, control, and monitoring capability that and it's a lofty objective, right? But if you think about what companies like Amazon and Uber and all these, it's like a service startup of the week, right? You combine product A with product B to get product C. If you think about Uber Eats, Uber Freight, Whole Foods Delivery, et cetera, it's really kind of what you're getting at, right? It's these new businesses are being stood up, or new verticals are being stood up almost like overnight, and they're pretty successful. And in a large part because us as consumers, not warfighters, but as consumers, we've adapted our mindset, our paradigms are all about how do we quickly access and consume those services as they're made more and more convenient. Right now, you're kind of thinking about, if you think about something for some reason and somehow it pops up on your feed, and with like something like Google Glass, or Army's getting ready to field IVAS, right? It's like think and blink and look, the thing's on its way to you, right? It's at the speed of thought. And so if you look closely at the diagram, you've got these little squares, we call them lily pads: sensors, shooters, sustainers, et cetera. We're not making a distinction between an Army shooter or Air Force shooter. We're really looking at the capability, right? And in some regards, some of these capabilities are almost commodities, right? And it really, the difference is the delivery mechanism, right? If an explosion is delivered via a bomb that's dropped by an aircraft, or through a missile, or through a piece of artillery, right? The effect is the same. The delivery mechanism is different, right? So whether you got an Uber X or Uber XL, you still got to the airport in time, right? So what's making the differentiator, what's differentiating the resource assignments are the, environmental, regulatory, and market conditions. If you think about that, right, there's an analogy there, where, you've got commander's guidance, rules of engagement, whatnot, and commander's intent, agreements and whatnot, ballistics capabilities, weather conditions, whatnot, that really, really help determine, where and, the why, when, and where of what, targets to prosecute. So unrolling all that, that's really where we got, that's the term fires as a service, right? So you see it's a little bit more than a catchy name, but then we also started looking at, and if you look closely at the model, you can see we start looking at things like sustainment as a service, right? Again, it's a commodity, delivery of a particular, water, food, ammunition, medical supplies, medical missions as a service, right? And there's a big implication, and there's all kinds of concepts there where, you can start cataloging the different capabilities as a product or service. And then there's this, underlying kind of foundational service that you're thinking, where, anybody that needs to be mobile in the battle space, right, can think of it as being able to implement an maneuverable interface, right? And they can plug into the network and basically get directions on where to go, and then also provide, that trackability of, where that your particular resource is in the battle space. So that whole kind of model helped us, encapsulate and contain various sets of problems that our partners trying to get after. And once you've got that holistic kind of map of all the different processes, all the different capabilities, how they interrelate, what are the data flows, what are the needs between them, just not just data, but also material flows, you can really start to look inwardly at the different processes, systems, and data that deliver those products and services, right? So now we've got this canvas, now we can start focusing based on priority or whatever objectives we have, really getting at what is the, what are the actual data and compute needs of delivering that capability. And really that gives us the ability to apply real context to the cloud migration and app rationalization processes, and really being able to use things like lean portfolio management and value stream mapping to really understand, where and why you're going to apply cloud or other tech paradigms. And I think, we can all agree we overuse cloud, but as a term, but there's new technologies that the DoD, entities aren't using, for various reasons. But I think we need to envision, the use of those technologies and paradigms in the future to really help us dictate how we fight. And so as we're getting into the cloud bit, right, we just want to pump the brakes here a little bit, and we want to say that, the warfighter's cloud is different than your commercial cloud, right? You're not going to have Netflix. You're not going to be able to order pizza on Uber Eats for your, for your platoon. And most of your actual warfighter is going to be working in very austere environments where we need to carefully design, engineer in and around the fact that the enemy is going to be trying to destroy and deny access to that infrastructure that we take for granted in the commercial side. So basically, if you need compute and data in the battlefield, you're going to need everything, that goes along with it, including, the electricity, the fuel, the generator, everything that you actually need to actually, run your equipment. So for the warfighter, you can say that data and compute has weight, and it's both physical and mental, right? So physical and the additive manufacturing that's required, to actually have that compute. So there's an incentive there to try to get the, as powerful as you can get in a small package, as small as possible package in the hands of your warfighter, right? But then give them enough compute and ability to handle the volume of data that we're going to, that we intend to inundate them with to do their mission, right? So we have to be smart about, not just flooding them, flooding the warfighter with data just because we can. And at the end of the day, there's an economy of that data. We just don't have those conveniences, right? So, right now, that's where really value stream is super important. And we're seeing cases where, you've got these legacy systems and everything that goes along with them, the generators, the batteries, the fuel, right, that goes along with them to keep them going, deployed forward. But there's some paradigms in our current processes and way of thinking that, a lot of that functionality that those legacy systems have today isn't being used. And we're putting a big investment in actually getting those systems to the warfighter and whatnot, and trying to unpack, well, why aren't they being used? And we find that they're hard to set up and configure correctly. Because they're not configured correctly, the warfighters don't trust them all the way, right? And in many cases, you're finding that the warfighters are actually using more user-friendly and agile applications like Excel and PowerPoint to do the job that we were previously relying on these. We made investments to give them these systems to do. So something's obviously broken there. And that's a good way to maybe start unpacking about where cloud and new tech can really help with that problem, help getting at the cause of that problem and fixing it. So, again, just going back to not cloud for cloud's sake, but let's be cloud smart and open up the aperture and identify where cloud and new tech can really help the warfighter and they're doing their job. Basically, enabling scalability and fault tolerance throughout the entire ecosystem. It's an intrinsic cloud capability, but how do we actually apply that and leverage that in the warfighter's cloud? Moving where use cases are performed. So we're finding a lot of use cases that are performed down at the edge, but really what the cloud and new tech enables us to do is actually pull a lot of those data curation and configuration management tasks back from the edge where they can be done in a more controlled environment. And if you think about things like maps and configuration of your download, think about an automated download of your COP, your common operating picture inputs like weather and whatnot, all that data being prepared and actually pushed out to the warfighter as connectivity permits. That enables that trust. If that warfighter has good data in their systems, even in the legacy systems, we can really get back to untapping the capabilities that those systems are intended to provide them and basically trust what they're doing for us and really and improve the speed. Of course, you're going to have a big speed advantage on a purpose-built system versus something that you're kludging together with Excel and PowerPoint.
Arnie, and that's a good. That's a good segue over because I do want John to talk about. Yeah. You hit data a couple of times. It's a good transition over to John to hit on the DoD, the data initiatives you're working that are supporting the concept that Arnie just talked about. So thanks, Arnie.
Yeah,
John, over to you, man.
Hey, thanks, George. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm John Burnham. I'm going to be talking about the departmental's data strategy. As George noted, we've been working with the Chief Data Officer team on the implementation of the data strategy that was written and then published this past fall. You saw the previous Fires as a Service slide where in the middle you had that globe that showed multi-domain operations and then the virtual battle space, the virtual data lake. We've all seen those. And one of the big things that we're trying to work right now is to make sure that all the data, as Arnie noted, all the data is enabled for the best, fastest decisions, operational advantage, and maximum efficiency. So what does that look like? With the permission of Mr. Dave Spurk, who's the Department Chief Data Officer, I've pulled two slides from a deck that he uses to brief leadership because I think they frame this issue very well. One of the big things we talk about is DoD, you see it across the bottom, a data-centric organization. Now that's a challenge because we all work with data. We've worked with data throughout our careers. So we may believe that we understand what's required to do it the right way. But of course, that's not always the case. One of the challenges, in fact, is preventing that familiarity from breeding contempt, as it were. So many, particularly in leadership now, have deployed out to overseas task forces or been in a deployed space where there's an enclosed data environment. The world's confined to that operational and tactical area. Arnie alluded to that earlier. And of course, you get back and you want to start talking transnational and at an enterprise scale, there are different factors that you have to consider. So when we envision this, the other thing we have to take into account, you look over on the left, the explosion of publicly and commercially available data over this past decade. And not just the availability of the data, but the availability of the commoditized technology to exploit it and really do something with it. Mixing that with what we've got for the departmental data, Project Convergence, Project Overmatch, there are other efforts out there trying to get that, the sensor to shooter, but also sensor back to that data repository the right way. But mixing those two together and getting them set the right way before you can even start talking about applications and services is one of the big challenges that we're seeing. When you're just looking at tactical situations, it's one thing. When you're talking about transnational threats and opportunities in the great power arena, it's something different. So In the middle, we start with the data sources. You always have to, and breaking down those silos and working through into the data management. And in between there, you've got to worry about governance, interfaces, interface agreements, standards, make sure everything can fit in the same box. After that, everybody's got analytics. Can those analytics interoperate? Can they move data among themselves and up through the chain of command? And not just that, but also multi-domain to be able to get to where we want, which is that AI-enabled mission command. Everybody says that, and if you ask 10 people, you'll get 15 different answers as to what that means. But what everybody can agree on is senior leaders being able to make better decisions, and the warfighters out at the edge able to have better context for the decisions they're going to be making and how they can communicate that back up. Now, you look down across the bottom, two other big focus areas we've got. We talked a little bit about governance already, and that's not just for DoD. It's also for interagency partners and international mission partners, the mission partner environments that we see out there. But then on the left, data, talent, and culture. General Wegeman talked a lot about this morning, about how people, you have to get it right for the people. It is people first. When you talk about the collaborative dependency and the customer satisfaction, all that is centered around people. And they have to believe that putting this work in their organizations is going to make it work better at the enterprise level, and it's not going to bog things down. I think another pervasive issue is small equals fast. We know that in today's era, enterprise can equal fast as well. Now, how does all this apply? If you can go to the next slide, please. When we talk about unleashing the data, as George mentioned, there are a bunch of different ways to envision this. We've captured it around, if you look over on the right, those are the goals listed in the data strategy of what we want data to be. The guiding principles are on the left. How are we going to do the chief data officer councils? Between the military departments, combatant commands, defense agencies, and field agencies, there's 48 separate components that all will be, if they don't already have chief data officers, they're going to have them. And not just that, but then you've got all the practitioners that are out there. So it's really a broad effort that we have to put together. The focus areas, everybody's alluded to it already. The joint all-domain C2, the joint all-domain operations in C2, obviously. The one that we haven't really talked about is over on the right, the business analytics. Because as everybody knows, mission data is one thing, but then it's also human capital data, everything that goes through recruitment and selection and training, promotion, all of that can run better. The organization will be better if the data architecture is correct. What are those essential capabilities? Well, we've seen them down there already. Everything from architecture across the talent and culture. You want to get to that digital modernization, as we know. And all of it's aimed back at the edge. If you look up at the top left, the CDO chose the symbol with that individual, the person in the middle. And there's a reason for that. Data practices, not only are everybody's responsibility, but in the end users are going to be the ones that are going to achieve the benefits. So that's the goal, to try to get the enterprise thinking that way, and not just benefit the senior levels, which is usually where you see it, but all the way out to the edge. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague who's going to talk a little bit more. Marty's going to talk a little bit more about those analytics at the edge and how the data is used.
Great, thank you, John. So data is the glue. The administrative IT systems need to provide the basis to support the mission. And as we look at this a little bit more closely, effectively what we see is the AdCon systems need to be thought about differently. They need to be part of the collaboration with the mission and not just a set of systems that exist in the background. Commercially, our research has shown that to be successful, a digital-first approach must be fostered by the entire leadership team and manifested across all areas of the organization. This is equally applicable to mission. When we think about Enable, it really is a people-first mentality, as George said. We have to have the right people with the right skills. And this means that we need to think about recruiting differently, training and equipping in manners that change the way we bring talent to the mission. We need to invest in training and development of a digital-minded workforce that can engage with transformative technologies. HR systems need to be adapted to track different skills and capabilities. Learning solutions need to engage in ways that we have not been using mainstream in the past: gamification, XR learning, bite-sized learning, tailored based on need. when we think about the security of things, the security that's required for sharing data has to have those strong systems that are SSO enabled, that have zero trust attributes and foundation. Our cyber financial management systems provide critical security. Security operations is more than following process and procedures and standing watch. Security must be infused with automation to enable efficiency and reduce manual errors. Advanced analytics techniques need to be enabled to allow for detection of anomalies. As the recent Sunburst situation showed us, even what you trust can still bring risk. And lastly, as we operate, ITSM brings us a basis for consistent and reliable operations. Standardization is a minimum. Automation and optimization should be commonplace. This further reduces the dependency on manual labor in the integration of all components and operations with the mission team. When we think about our North Star design and DevSecOps, those provide two common techniques to increase collaboration. One last bit of research from what we've been looking at from the Tech Vision. 83% of executives agree that the organization's business and technology strategies are becoming inseparable, even indistinguishable. And I think that that's critical because that's really how we bring the convergence and bring these things together. So with that, what I'd like to do is move on to questions and answers that have been asked from the group. I'll leave with the perspective here, and then I think we can dive into some of the questions. So we had one question that came in that was, how would you describe your high-level guidance and intent for working with commercial industry? Where are areas that you would want to better connect, and how can industry help you to innovate? What are the ways that industry could help you better develop and maintain operational readiness and help you in mission execution? I mean, I'll add a couple points to that I think have been critical from what I've seen in terms of, the AdCon systems really supporting. And it's really the collaboration and the openness to sharing data. If everything becomes proprietary, it becomes very difficult to deal with a data ecosystem in which things can't be shared openly and can't be provided in a manner that ultimately supports the mission. So I think that when we think about how data is produced and how data is put into support of the mission, we need to think about it with the sense that the data provides the basis that is open for all players to have access to and to be able to use for the appropriate purpose. So anything else that anyone would like to add to the question?
Yeah, Murray, this is George, and I'll actually kind of in closing, I'll capture some high points. And it's a great question, and it really does kind of lead to what really is our conclusion, as industry partners. And I gave similar remarks at a panel recently that General Wegeman really hit on this notion of trust and a different kind of relationship between industry, academia, government, DoD counterparts. That is absolutely essential if we're going to do this in that kind of collaborative way where we bring that, the best of industry technology, that 40% change a year, the industry best practice that John and Arnie talked about, that ability, it's going to have to change how we acquire. We're going to have to be a lot more collaborative in the acquisition process. And I would say we're going to have to do that, with all of the lawyers and the acquisition experts to keep us bounded by rules, but we need to push those rules as far to the right in the process as possible, so that commanders and operators and the individual, the airman, the soldier who are using the system have as much input up to the point in time where they shouldn't. In other words, there's an acquisition process that does need to be clean and competitive and legal, but commanders, operators, people should be involved in that as much as possible. And then once we get into any kind of delivery, the relationship that we have with some of our, folks who we've worked with, the Air Force on Enterprise IT as a Service, it is a super collaborative, daily discussion around outcomes, objectives, goals, standards. That continuous collaboration, from operator through program management really is essential. And you have to do that by building trust, and it's service level agreements. It's all those mechanics that allow you to put the right framework, the governance in place to do it appropriately and legally and correctly. At the same time, we really need to make ourselves uncomfortable and stretch the bounds of collaboration, build the trust, be able to bring that team together in ways we just haven't brought them together before. And I do give, again, a lot of the DoD components, Dave Spurk at the DoD CDO, a lot of the, the leaders in the enterprise are trying to get us there. And I think we're on the right track. Forums like this help us do that. So that's kind of in closing, I would say again, this is new battle space, this transformation and convergence. We really don't know where we're going. There's not a clear path ahead, and 40% of what we do is going to change every year. So we can never really get there. And what got us to the point where we are today with our weapon system development and acquisition, that will not get us there to the future. And so I think we're going to have to all work this together every bit of collaboration and trust built into this innovation to really keep us ahead of our adversaries and deliver the kind of systems that we need to the, warfighters and commanders. So thank you again, Rocky Mountain AFCEA. Thanks very much for the opportunity to let us participate. Thanks to the team here. Again, you can tell everybody's pretty passionate about what they do on the piece of the fight that we're in. We are. So again, thanks to Rocky Mountain for letting us be part of the presentations today. Thank you.
No problem, sir. Thank you, and thank your panel for spending your time and your expertise with us today. As a token of our appreciation, we'll be mailing everyone on the panel one of our custom embossed notebooks as kind of a remembrance of your session today. So we appreciate you sharing all your insights with us and look forward to maybe having you back here again with us in one of our future sessions, maybe in person, hopefully, when we get all through this. So thank you again. Appreciate it. Okay, folks, take a quick break, visit the virtual exhibitors hall that I mentioned in the beginning, and do support our sponsors and exhibitors. Join a few of those tech talks that are starting in a few minutes, and I will see you a little further down your agenda in our next session at 12:30 for our first lunchtime speaker, Ms. Laura Naussenberger, who is now the Chief Information Officer of the Air Force. So very looking forward to her remarks in just a little bit here. See you in a few at the next stream. Take care.